Hello, my name is Laura Caruso, and this is a video orientation to world history and its expression in the arts, a class for homeschooled high school students. The title refers to the fact that it is not only a history class, but also a humanities class as well. So by the time students finish the year, they will have full credit of history and half credit of humanities as well. I know not all of you know me, so for those of you that do, you're welcome to fast forward past this next little section, but for those of you that don't, I thought I'd give you a little background on how it is that I came to be teaching these classes. So this is our family, my husband Brett and our only child Kaylin. We began this homeschooling adventure back in 2001. Kaylin was in 3rd grade, and that first year was really a turning point for us. First of all, we really had never had an intention to homeschool, but are so grateful that God brought us to that place. My husband often says that homeschooling was one of the best things that ever happened to our family, and it was. That very first year, I was really concerned that we do everything right. I don't want to mess her up. And so we enrolled with a large private school in Orlando that acted as kind of our covering. And they would have us come and check in with them regularly, look at all that we were doing. And then as part of the requirement for being under their covering, I was required to do in-service hours, just like their professional teachers would, kind of continuing education. And they offered courses that we could take, and there was one that caught my attention called Teaching History from a Biblical Perspective. I'd always had an interest in history, and I'm not telling you this to brag on myself, I'm just telling you, I graduated public high school in Orlando, but I was the top history student, in my graduating year. So I'd had an interest, I enjoyed the subject, I thought this will be good, I'd grown up in the church, and so this will be an interesting thing. Guys, I'm ashamed to tell you that I had never considered history from this perspective. And so as Peggy Coven, who in God's providence had come to teach this course for this time, and as I understand it, just that year, I was sitting in that classroom. And as she began to open her mouth and to teach, it's like light bulbs are going off in my brain. Because I'd been in church. We say, God's in control and God's sovereign over all things. But this was really the first time that I married that idea of God's sovereignty to the discipline of history, and really began to understand that history was not just the story of man and what he had been accomplishing through time, but to the contrary, time itself was God's, that he carved it out of eternity. That he started with creation. When he created the universe, we started counting times and seasons. At some point, that's all going to come to an end. But this little time frame that we have carved out of eternity, it belongs to him. And it's all about him. And the whole focal point of it is Jesus Christ, which reconciles us to him. So all of that time that we're marking is God's. And it's really the story of what God is accomplishing through men and nations over time. It's his story. Well, when I once had that perspective, it was a whole new ballgame. I was so excited to really learn the truth about history. And not only that, but what Mrs. Coven was teaching me was not to go to, prepared curriculums, but to really to dig deep and to become a living textbook, so to speak, to really understand what it was that I was teaching, and then take all of that material, those primary sources, those great first-person stories and biographies, whatever, all of that material, to digest it and prepare it so that my audience, 4th graders at the time, could understand it and could grasp some of these big ideas about God and what he was accomplishing and his faithfulness and just foundational principles about self-government and liberty of conscience and all of that. You can start at 4th grade. So as I began to study and learn all these things, I have to tell you, I was really excited, but there was a part of me that was also really sad because I recognized how much I had missed. There was so much that I was learning that I had never been taught in my years in public school. And quite frankly, it's not taught in private school either. So much was missing from my own education. And God was using this as an opportunity to redeem my education. But I also became passionate about being sure that my daughter knew these truths and understood history from this vital, exciting perspective as being God's story, a story that you are privileged to take part in. But also, we became involved in a local co-op about that time. So this co-op was Team Homeschool Co-op. It was founded by my pastor's wife and dear friend Joy Chambers. And so we became part of the co-op. I started to teach history within the co-op, and that developed over the years. I just kept moving up year after year after year, and learning more and understanding it at a deeper level that I could teach to these young people. Then in 2007, I took my first big group on a field study tour. So some of you know that I do that, but those are my two main thrusts. I teach American history, world history, government, and economics from a biblical perspective, a providential view, a principled approach. But then I also think it's crucial to take young people and old people too, to stand in the very places where we can really appropriate those lessons. Stand in the places where those things happened, where those people that are involved walked and worked and lived and sacrificed. That's what really drives that lesson home. It plants it in a way that I think is really meaningful and lasting. So I started to do that in 2007, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I've been teaching now for quite a long time and touring as well. I'm so grateful. I remember after the first couple tours, being in a shuttle bus headed back to the airport by myself, and I'm just looking out the window around the city of Washington, D.C., and I said, oh, Lord, if you just allow me to do it one more time. And, he's allowed me to do it many, many more times. So I'm very grateful for that, and grateful that you're considering being part of the class. We have a couple more images here from, our homeschool days and from homeschool graduation. And then this next slide is Kaylin graduating from Liberty University just a few years ago. So again, my message to you, and maybe as parents of homeschooling high schoolers, this doesn't even occur to you anymore, but I'm not that far ahead of you, I don't think. But back in my day, I just remember thinking that, am I really going to be able to provide everything she needs to go on to the next step? Are we somehow going to be missing out on something and, not having her in a traditional high school environment? And guys, I'm just here to tell you, if this is what God is calling you to, walk it out in obedience. He is faithful to provide everything that you need. Our high school education, what God provided for Kaylin, was far beyond what we could have asked or imagined. Her internship with Teen Pact, the precious, real friendships that she enjoyed through our co-op and through the Teen Pact ministry, were far beyond my own high school experience. And her academic preparation was also excellent. God provided just the resources we needed at just the right times. So all that to say, to God be the glory that this young lady went on, entered the honors program at Liberty. She was a scholarship student, graduated from the honors program with a 4.0, and is now nearly completed a master's degree. So, just for fun too, so I'm a real person. This is me with my family. So here I am. I'm the oldest of four. This is my dad. My mom has passed away and gone to be with the Lord. I'm the oldest of four, so Brett and Kaylin. And then next is my sister. This is her husband, her two children. And my brother and his wife. There are three boys. Finally, my youngest brother with his wife and their little twins. And then this is Grammy Ann, who is my husband's mom, and she too has gone on to be with the Lord. But what a precious thing to have her there for Kaylin's graduation. She was 93 at the time. So a little bit about my family. Now, her degree was not the only thing that Kaylin found at Liberty University. She also met her future husband. So Ryan Gyrus came into our worlds and became her husband in 2016. So this is my current family right here. Just a little bit more about kind of my background, where we come from. I mentioned to you Teen Pact Leadership Schools. And so Teen Pact is a wonderful ministry. If you're not familiar with it, I really encourage you to get familiar with it. our co-op began to really encourage our young people to participate. Many of Kaylin's grade level folks and the ones that came after her became involved in the leadership side of TeenPact. One of the things that I really appreciate is that they really give kids an opportunity to practice their leadership skills. And to some of the things that we were teaching in the classroom, they're talking about how do you implement that in culture. So again, highly recommend TeenPact Leadership Schools. But because my young people were so involved in this, I stepped forward too and took on the role of state coordinator, which I did for several years until the year after Kaylin graduated, at which point a very capable lady stepped forward and said that she was interested in leading, and so I passed the baton at that point to Carlin Sullivan. And also at the same time stepped down from the board of directors for Team Homeschool Co-op, which left me with, okay, Lord, now what am I supposed to do? You know, my background, I know, you know, what I've done before, but is that what I'm supposed to do now? And it wasn't but a couple months before I had an answer, got a phone call, and was asked to consider becoming a field director for Florida Family Action during the 2012 presidential campaign. And so I got to do what I had been encouraging my young people to do, which was step forward, step out of your comfort zone, do hard things, apply all the principles you've learned. And so I went out and did that very thing. So I worked during that presidential campaign. By the time it was finished, I was ready to get back in the classroom and keep teaching. And also, guys, I mean, what was really wonderful is, you know, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly when you're out there participating in the process and kind of seeing, as they say, how the sausage is made. And there was a lot of it that wasn't very pleasant to see, the realities of the political process. But it convinced me even more that while we have an absolute responsibility to stand firm in the political arena, we must affect change in our home. It has to start there. And I really believed that God had called me and equipped me to do that, to come alongside families, to teach those foundational principles and raise up a generation that understood the sources of their liberties and was ready to defend those ideas. So at any rate, that's kind of where that all led. And then I was ready to go, okay, I'm done. And just a few months later, another issue kind of landed in my lap, and that was Common Core. And so I did that for a period of time as well, and traveled around the state, really trying to educate both legislators. Common Core had been adopted in a very quiet and kind of sneaky way, and many of our legislators really didn't understand it or what it meant and how to do anything about it. So we were trying to bring them up to speed and also educate parents, particularly homeschool families, about how Common Core might impact their homeschooling freedoms. So I spent some time doing that, and then again, eventually really came to the conclusion that where God had called me and best equipped me was to continue to teach, to come alongside homeschool families and prepare their young people. So that's what I'm very happily and busily doing today. Now, when I first began this journey, so back at the time that I was sitting under the teaching of Mrs. Coven, I remember this verse being introduced. And of course, I'd seen this verse. I grew up in church and I knew it, but it never really dawned on me the full meaning of what was here. Acts 17:26 says, He, God, made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. God made the nations, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation. Determined ahead of time. Times when they would rise and fall, right? When the Egyptians would be powerful, when they would not. When the Israelite nation would be powerful, when it would not. When the Roman Empire would rise and fall, the Assyrians, on and on, the Ming Dynasty, America, Spain, and the boundaries of their habitation. What would the boundaries of that Roman Empire, to what extent would they go and no further? That ultimately was under the sovereignty of God. I always kind of thought, well, treaties, it's by yes, it is by treaties, but that's a secondary cause. The primary cause is God. And he determined all this ahead of time. The beautiful part of this verse is not only that God truly is sovereign over the times and the boundaries of nations, but why. Why? So that they would seek God, if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. His story, the focal point is Jesus Christ, so that we would seek God, so that we might be reconciled to God. That's the whole purpose of the story. Another passage of scripture that became very important to me was Psalm 78, verses 1 through 11, and I'll take you through that. The psalmist says this, "Listen, O my people, to my instruction. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I'll open my mouth in a parable, a story. I'm going to tell you a story. I will utter dark sayings of old, the old stories." That's what I do, which we've heard and known and our fathers have told us. We will not conceal them from their children, but will tell to the generation to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wondrous works that he's done. So we're going to rehearse these stories in the ears of our children, emphasizing the praises of the Lord, the strength and the wondrous works of God. For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers they should teach them to their children, so that the generation to come might know, even the children yet to be born, that they may arise and tell them to their children. It's a multi-generational vision, right, of faithfulness that we see here, of you learning the stories, discussing them, talking about these things with your children, so that they'll know the truth to teach their children and the next generation, even the one that's yet unborn. Guys, that's how you turn the country. That's how you turn a nation. That's how you turn a culture, is that you start by recognizing truth and teaching truth to the children. Then it tells us why. Why is it so important that they know this, that we rehearse these stories about the greatness of God and his wondrous works? Well, it's so that they'll put their confidence in God and not forget the works of God. So that they'll understand that he is the author of history, that he is sovereign, that they can trust him, that he's faithful. That some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will trust in the name of the Lord our God. Let me go on a little bit. The psalmist says they'll not forget the works of God, and they'll keep his commandments and not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that did not prepare its heart and whose spirit was not faithful to God. I would submit to you today, that's us. That's where we are in our culture right now. We are a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose spirit is not faithful to God. I'm not pointing fingers at you, the parent. I'm saying look around us. Look at the things we're embracing in our culture today. We are a stubborn and rebellious generation. Then he inserts this little anecdote, this little illustration. The psalmist says, "The sons of Ephraim were archers equipped with bows, yet they turned back in the day of battle. They didn't keep the covenant of God and refused to walk in his law." Well, what's that all about? Well, I'll tell you. The sons of Ephraim were kind of like special forces in the Israeli army. They were specially trained, and they were a deadly force, much like our Army Rangers or Navy SEALs. But they were a unit that they were a unit of archers, and it tells us they were equipped with bows. Guys, they had the highest technology of the day, the best technology of the day in their bows, and they were highly trained, and they stood soldier to soldier and shoulder to shoulder and soldier to soldier. And when they did, and they let loose, volley after volley after volley of arrows, it was a deadly force, one to be feared. And these were some of the best. But these sons of Ephraim, who had the best technology, who were highly trained guys, they turned back in the day of battle. What happened? They forgot his deeds and his miracles that he had shown them. They thought it was all about them and their highly trained unit and their technology, their great military. No, some trust in horses, some in chariots, but we will trust in the name of the Lord our God. That's why we have to keep rehearsing these things in the ears of our children, reminding them of the mighty works of God. I would submit to you that our children are already in the day of battle. If we want them to be able to stand strong in the future, when they face an onslaught against everything that they stand for and believe, we need to instill in them a strong faith in God. And that is what we hope to do. That's one of the goals that we seek to accomplish in history. We want to learn. They'll learn dates, they'll learn names, they'll learn all these things. But running through it is this idea that God is sovereign, that he's accomplishing his purpose through men and nations, that he is faithful and you can trust him. I want to show you one other thing. I just think this is really cool. This is the introduction to a history book that was used throughout the United States up until the time of the Civil War. And in its introduction, it says this: the study of history is the most fitting nourishment to promote the growth and strength of the expanding intellect of youth. So, of course, I love that. Then it says, time is precious, and better will be our regret should the days of our youth have been spent without enriching our minds with something of the knowledge of God and of the human race, which is hoarded in the lap of history. But having acquired this treasure, we shall feel amply rewarded for our labor as we discern the hand of our Heavenly Father and recognize with grateful hearts the wisdom and goodness of the plan he has prescribed for the advancement of mankind towards civilization and perfection. Thus, the study of history, while enriching us with an inestimable knowledge of past generations, is also leading us to a better acquaintance with God. Clearly are we taught that he extends his protecting hand over all his children, and that all are called into being to fulfill some wise purpose. You who think that chance has brought forth all that exists, and that chance decides the fate of nations and individuals, read history with becoming attention, and you will soon acknowledge your error and joyfully testify to the great truth that an intelligent, all-wise, and benevolent being is the creator and ruler of the world. This was the introduction to the textbook used in many of our schools prior to the Civil War. This is the worldview that we're recovering in our approach to world history this year. All right, let's get into some of the specifics of the course. I mentioned to you earlier, it is a 1.5 credit course. So just know that upon completion of the course, we'll be inserting humanities moments all throughout the year. And so they would qualify, your student would qualify for a full credit in world history and a half credit in humanities. I've given you the Florida course codes here. Just FYI, I was looking at the Bright Futures website, and it does look like if you want to count it for Bright Futures as a humanities credit, you have to choose the honors level. So just a heads up for you parents that may be looking towards Bright Futures scholarships. For the world history, you can choose either. You can count it as a standard class or as an honors level course. And my thought on that is really that the lectures and coursework can certainly be considered honors level, but credit would be dependent upon full, excellent, and all-in efforts in homework assignments. But again, I leave that to your discretion as a parent, or call me if you want to talk further about that. So the format of the class. The class is hosted using a PowerSchool website, not my Providential History website. So it's a separate thing. You register. There's no cost to do that, to become part of PowerSchool. And each week, actually, let me just show you that real quickly. So this is what that would look like. This is, week 18 in world history. So you can see over on the left, each week looks a little different. Oh dear. Hold on just a second. Let me get myself back in for you. Okay, here we are. So week 1 is going to look different than week 18. But here you see the video class, so they would simply click the link, the video would begin to play. Your student ahead of time would download note sheets, so down, a separate block there would be note sheets, a PDF document, so they download and print the lecture note sheets, they're following along with the video lecture. Sometimes in a video lecture I will then refer to outside sources, stop, pause the video, I'd like you to watch this linked video. For example, this week there was a clip on castle building, and so they'll pause, watch a little bit about castle building, and then later pause and watch this little bit about Charlemagne. Their homework is posted to that week's page, so again there'll be some instructions, then they would click this link to download their homework sheet for the week, giving them instructions, very specific instructions about what the homework is. So hopefully that's helpful in kind of understanding what the class might look like. Right, let's get back over here. There we go. Let's see. So that's all what's included. Detailed rubrics. So I think it's helpful for your student to upload their work, which they can do through that PowerSchool website. So there's an online grade book and a place where they can upload their homework. So just for accountability's sake, I think that's a great thing to encourage your student to do. I, however, am not going to be looking at every homework assignment to evaluate it. So that is a parental responsibility, but I give you everything you need to do it. Very detailed rubric, down to kind of, what to expect as an answer, etc., and a sample homework assignment, so you can see exactly what might this answer look like for each of the questions. So the rubrics are designed to evaluate the student's work based on completeness, following directions, the accuracy of their information, and the quality of original thought. You'll also notice as we move through the year that my goal is really to have your students think critically and not just regurgitate information out of a textbook. So while I'll talk about this resource in just a moment, they'll have this resource, we'll use it from time to time, but really not frequently. And what we don't want, it is not biology class where we're just, I'm not downing biology class, but we're not just pulling a definition out of the book and writing verbatim what we find. What we are wanting students to do is gather information, process it, think it through, and then develop an answer and record it well. So they are, using their reasoning skills and relating disparate materials and then coming up with a well thought out answer. So that's a skill. Clearly, we're not going to be excellent at it right off the bat probably, but that's something we want to work towards throughout the year. Okay, grading in the gradebook. There is an online gradebook that's associated with that PowerSchool site. So for most parents, that's an easy place to keep records. My recommended breakdown for the assignments is that weekly homework counts as 50% of the grade, online quizzes are 25%, and exams and special projects would be 25%. The online quizzes grade automatically and upload to the grade book. The other materials you would be grading and then sending me the grade so that I can upload it to the grade book, and then it would automatically weight your student's grade in that way. However, that is not a necessity, so if you prefer to keep their grades independently, that is totally fine and totally up to you as the primary educator. While I'm talking about primary educator, guys, this class is really designed not for students to work totally independently. So it is designed for parents as primary educator. So I'm coming alongside you, I'm giving you everything, hopefully everything you need to be successful. But it's really important, if at all possible, that you listen to the lectures as well, because quite frankly, this is material that's taught from a perspective that we were not taught, and there are going to be new ideas there. And so to really have those walk in the way kind of discussions with your students, you need to understand what's happening and how that might be applying to what's happening in the world today. And believe me, there will be application. So I just highly recommend that. It helps. You're going to have to be involved in some of the homework, meaning, being sure they understand what's being asked for, or that they understand the primary source document. So they'll be referred to a John Locke document, not the whole thing, but, excerpts from John Locke. And they're going to need to spend 15 or 20 minutes reading through that document with you to be sure they understand the context. But guys, it's worth it, because when they know I've seen the original thing, I know what John Locke said, and I know what John Locke meant, then it builds great confidence in the future to say, I know where these ideas came from, and I that's more American history focused, but that's the basic principle, is that they can stand firm in knowing they don't just have somebody's opinion, they've seen the primary source documents. So there's value in that. Consultation. Just know that I love to interact with you, that I see myself as a partner with your family, and students are encouraged to be in touch with me directly, parents as well. That can take the form of email or phone call or a video chat like this. We can do a Skype call or a FaceTime. If you have questions about something, need explanation on how to do MLA, whatever. Oftentimes I can show my screen, we can share screen, and you can see how to do a certain thing. So just know I'm available to you, that this is not just a sign up and you're on your own video class. The resource text I showed you earlier, again, primarily students are going to be creating a notebook record of their learning by downloading those note sheets every week, filling them in, highlighting them, adding color pictures, there are all kinds of things. So that's the primary record of learning, really. But from time to time, it is helpful to be able to send them somewhere just for an overview of a certain time period before I lecture on it. So occasionally we will use this text as a resource. Know that it's been around for a long time, so but thankfully world history doesn't change year to year. So you can find this usually for less than $10. I found it today for about $4 on dealoz.com. So World History for Christian Schools, 2nd edition, is the only required textbook for the class. Also, I just want you to know, too, I don't want to raise expectations or have unrealistic expectations. We will start at creation, and we will get through the 16th century, but just know that the world history is not a complete survey of everything from creation to the modern day. So ancient civilizations in depth, along with the 1,000-year medieval period, moving into the Renaissance, the Reformation, and for kind of a more detailed description, definitely see the course overview. And be in touch with me if you have specific questions about that. Some of the goals of the course are obviously that we want students to have a different view of history, to understand that God is accomplishing his grand universal plan from creation to the present day, but he's using men and nations to accomplish it. We want students to grasp the chronological development of nations, so we'll go in order. We want to see cause and effect. We want to see the flow of his story. And we'll focus on the religious origins of the various nations and movements and how those impacted the flow of history. We also want to look at major aspects of thought that have developed and spread across the globe and what their result has been. Have those theories produced liberty or bondage, depending on whether they were built on true Christianity? And finally, to bring every student to an understanding of his or her role individually in preserving liberty through individual self-government. Some of the methods we use, we've talked about already, but notes from the video lectures, they'll have written homework assignments based on assigned documents. They'll be developing that notebook. They'll be mapping, comparing and contrasting, defining terms, looking for cause and effect. There are outside readings from various texts. And, when I say primary resources, some of them are modern articles, but they're reading, well-written, scholarly articles, not just a textbook, because textbooks can tend to kind of take the joy out of history. All right, mapping, I said. Oh, visual analysis of significant art and architecture and music I should have put in there, so they're getting lots of humanities moments throughout the year. Current events material as it relates to our study, and creative projects that reflect their understanding of a particular culture. Also, just so you know, there is an optional 2-hour live class once a month on Thursdays at Rogue Scholar, which is a co-op that meets in Conway. So, and I said on Thursdays, one Thursday a month is the live class. So on that given week, you would not watch the video at home. Instead, you would come to the live class to hear the teaching and participate in class and ask questions and that kind of thing. So if that appeals to you, that idea of kind of face-to-face, I love it. I love getting to know your students that way. So if you're close enough and that appeals to you, you'd be welcome to attend that live class one Thursday a month. But just know that it does incur an additional $100 because part of it needs to pay for my travel to and from Jacksonville to Orlando. And then $50 of that goes to the host church for allowing us to meet there. Field study tour discount, something I wanted to mention to you, and I'll show it to you if we run over to my website. So this is not PowerSchool, but my providentialhistory.net website. Y'all know I do these field study tours, and so as a student enrolled in one of my classes, they would be entitled to a $100 discount on any of the big tours. So the Williamsburg, Washington, D.C., or the Boston trips. So it would be, rather than $880, it would be $780. And then for any family members that attend, they would take $50 per person off the cost of the trip. Right, that's tours. Let me bop back over here. Thank you for your patience with my technology. Okay, I think this brings me to my last slide. So attached to this email and also on my website, you'll find the syllabus, and the last page of the syllabus is a registration form. At some point, I will need the registration form from you, so print it out and send it. You can scan it back or snail mail it to me, either way. Or you can register for the class via the website. But again, at some point, I'll be sending you this form and wanting to have all of this information. So, so that's important, and you hold your spot for next year in World History with a $50 deposit. There are other classes that will be available as well. American History will all be available for you, and so that also is simply a $50 deposit if that's what you're needing, or American Government. I think, yep, that is the end of orientation. So if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to be in touch with me. I'd love to talk with you about it.